I believe Christ, much of the story of Christ has gone missing from the New Testament of the Bible, considering it only documents his birth, a brief mention of teaching spiritual leaders at the temple in Jerusalem at a very young age, and then there's a huge gap, which can most reasonably be explained by the theory that he had physically been removed from the geographic area from where the Bible was written around Jerusalem. And when he finally arrives back on the scene, back around Jerusalem, his ministry around Jerusalem didn't actually last very long. In Matthew chapter 2, the wise men from the east traveled to Jerusalem to worship Christ when they saw his star. Verse 9 says, "The star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was." Apparently, these wise men had a long historical tradition that was a bit advanced and beyond what most people think of as astrology. This verse describes more of a communion with whatever intelligence was of the star from the heavens. This sounds like they were guided by some kind of celestial body, sort of like a celestial Tinkerbell. When they saw Christ with his mother, they fell down and worshiped him. Among the gifts, they gave him frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Most people are familiar with this story, although most Christians haven't been taught to read the books of the lands or lineages where the wise men came from. Although challenged by mainstream media, which is now called fake news, there are several accounts of the life of Christ around India, Persia, and Tibet. Again, a controversial topic. In my opinion, the principles we are learning are more important than the stories. And since the principles, which are the laws of nature, since the actual principles support the story, I tend to believe it. One of my personal friends named Glenn Tillotson, learning from top yogi masters who taught Glenn about their recorded accounts of the life of Christ in the East. As part of their customary tradition, Eastern masters arranged for Christ to travel to their land in the East. Again, this is a controversial story. And just think of how many dominant religions don't want this story taught, even if it is true. I come from a lineage who didn't teach me about this side of his story, as most of you do. An important question to be asking yourself as you're introduced to new information like this: does the story in any way conflict with any laws? Any laws of nature, any laws of God? And is the story actually supported by the actual laws? Apparently, Christ was a very fast learner. He started to expound and teach at the Temple of Jerusalem by the chrono of 12. And from the chrono of 13 to 29 years, he traveled east from Jerusalem to India and Tibet with his wealthy uncle, Joseph of Arimathea. And although it's been difficult to prove to mainstream historians, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Nicholas Notovich published a book in 1894 called The Unknown Life of Christ, where he translated nearly all of the two large yellowed volumes of a Tibetan document called The Life of Saint Isa. The word Isa means Son of God. Here are some of the online sources, and again, Wikipedia says it's fake. It's sort of like the pot calling the kettle black. Fake news saying it's fake. Oh yes, people tell on themselves all the time. According to this ancient book, translated over 120 years ago, Isa was accepted very well by many people in India, Persia, and Tibet, just not the elite abusers. According to the book, The Unknown Life of Christ, Hindu Brahmins didn't like him because of their caste system, which is still used to maintain the status quo of power, and they're still at the top of the chain today within the Hindu community. Again, you can find the same principles affecting every lineage, so they all have their tree of life and tree of death. And according to the legend, many of the Hindu, Yogi, and Buddhist people loved Christ.